Welcome to another episode of Two Old Geeks Talking. Now on the World Wide Web.
Welcome back to Two Old Geeks. I'm Rob.
I'm Trace.
And today we're discussing
Judge Dredd.
There you go.
We're going to talk about the comic. We're going to talk about the two movies. And before we get started, if you like our content, do us a huge favor and please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the notification button, the little bell. It's a small little click for you, but oh gosh, it means so much to us, doesn't it?
Yeah. More for me to put my...
Huh? What?
For me, more to put in here.
Oh yeah, there you go. There you go. So anyway, Judge Dredd. So, how much do you know about Judge Dredd?
What I know about Judge Dredd could probably fit in that hat. Not a lot, but that's a pretty big ass hat.
That's a pretty big head. You got a big head. Yeah, it's quite.
I mean, I know some, but probably not as much as you do.
Hey, that's why I'm here, brother. Originally, there was a comic over in Britain called Action Comics, and so it kind of got a reputation as the bad boy comic because one of the issues was actually banned. What they done is they had it was a black and white comic, and they would color the cover.
Wasn't it called? I thought it was called like
2000 AD. It eventually became 2000 AD. So it started out as Action Comics. And so there was like a guy standing over top of a guy he just knocked down and he dropped his gun. Well, when they colored the cover, they colored the guy that was knocked down to look like a police officer. So that was like a big hubbub over in Britain. Okay. And so the comic was banned. Well, that just made it more popular with young teenage boys. And so eventually it transitioned from Action Comics over to 2000 AD. And the character Judge Dredd appeared in the second issue of 2000 AD.
Okay.
And so back then, comic books over there for 2000 AD looked totally different. And so when so they were called progs. They wouldn't call it comics. And I was actually able to obtain a couple of them. There's one back here as well. So these would come on the newsstand every Monday.
That's badass.
So it's like a newspaper. So look through that and show them.
Wait.
So yeah. So that's about almost 40 years old. And you see it says 24 pence on there, and a pence is 4 pence equals 5 cents. So it's like 24 cents. So you pick that up. Can you imagine being like a young boy over in Britain, picking that up off the newsstand every Monday?
Yeah.
So to describe the 2000 AD comic, it was a lot like our Heavy Metal. You know how you buy a Heavy Metal magazine, and it's got a bunch of short stories in there, and sometimes the stories conclude, and sometimes the stories carry over several issues. That's the way 2000 AD was. So it would have a color cover, and rarely anything inside the cover was color. And but Judge Dredd is a cop from the future. So there's a post-apocalyptic.
That was colored.
Yeah, they have some color in there. Yeah, and so he's a cop from a post-apocalyptic future, and so when and what he does is I'll get into it in a second, but when I was a kid growing up, right now Japanese comics are all the craze.
Yeah, mangas and mangas.
So when I was a kid, it was British comics. So comics like Rogue Trooper or Robo Hunter or Strodium Dog or Slime or Judge Dredd. We didn't get them over here, and because they were in such short supply, we craved them. So the first issue or the second issue of 2000 AD that has Judge Dredd in is worth quite a bit. But the English or the American, I guess I should say the American debut of Judge Dredd was in Eagle Comics #1.
I was going to say, who carried that?
That was it was Eagle Comics like in 1995. But the creator of Judge Dredd was John Wagner and Carlos Ezquerra, and he's a Spanish artist. Man, his art is fantastic, but when you see an interview with him, you can't. His English accent is so heavy on Spanish, I can hardly understand a word he says.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, but the thing is Yeah, his English is a lot better than my Spanish. But the thing is, whenever John Wagner and Carlos Ezquerra made the comic and made the character Judge Dredd, they kind of stepped away from him for a while. So they made the character and kind of become disinterested in him and left him to a lot of other writers and a lot of other artists who made the character popular. And then once the character got popular, they were like,
they want him back.
you know what? No, they come back and started.
No, that's Indian giving.
Yeah. Well, they came back.
I'm sorry, that's not politically correct. So that's you can't do that crap.
So they came back and started writing, and some of the best stories, and certainly some of the best art is from Carlos and John. But Judge Dredd, he's a senior street judge, and he works in a post-apocalyptic city called Mega City 1. So imagine the United States. And the whole eastern coast is one city, and it's Mega City 1. And it's has about 800 million citizens in it, and they live in these huge skyscrapers called blocks. Each block has about 50,000 citizens in it. The unemployment rate's like at 98%, and the judges can only respond to about 6% of total crime. So they give them these judges.
What do they call that? A dystopia.
Dystopian, yeah.
Society.
We used to say post-apocalyptic. Now they say dystopian.
Right. Fancy.
So they always got to change things. Emo to goth, and everything's got to change. But anyway, so the Justice Department controls the city, and they decide what the rules are. And so the judges go out, and they're like judge, jury, and sometimes executioner to the citizens because they don't have time. Because of the amount of crime and the small amount of crime they're able to deal with, what they do is they just try to streamline the whole justice system. So each judge is given a lawgiver, and so
which is a weapon, right?
Yeah, it's a weapon, and this is one I made, to look like the one from the 2012 movie.
Now, see, the one I recall is from the old ones. The old one has the clips at the top and has the real skinny.
Yeah. That was the original one. That was called Lawgiver Mach 1, and this is Mach 2. So inside this is your regular rounds. It's got explosive rounds.
Right. It's
You know
me and props. I love props.
So I actually found a video online where you could buy a certain type of off-brand Nerf gun. It was made to look like that, and you could make a few alterations to it and make it look just like the gun from the 2012 movie.
When you carry this to con, do you have to put something in the end that's orange or something so people...
You might have to now. I didn't back then when I originally did it. It's probably been about 4 or 5 years since I cosplayed as Judge Dredd. So they've got the lawgiver, and each lawgiver is it's got a fingerprint mode to it, to where like say if I was a judge and you picked up my gun, if I was a judge and you tried to pick up my gun, then it wouldn't recognize your fingerprints and it would explode.
Oh, okay.
Another weapon they have, or another tool they have, is the Law Master. It's like a motorcycle.
Okay.
Very versatile, getting in and out of traffic. It's got AI.
Everything starts with law, kind of like Batman. Everything starts with
bat. Yeah,
bad
yeah.
rain,
Go to the
bad
bathroom and use the bad toilet paper. So the bad commode. Have a bad doogie. So, but the Law Master was a motorcycle with huge wheels on it, almost like a automobile. But it had AI on it to where you could
That's what I was about to say. It was like a mobile office kind of.
Sure.
Everything you needed in it.
You could call it. It would come to you. It had machine guns on the front of it, and then they also had like a baton or they called it a day stick.
Not a law day stick.
No, they call it a day stick. You know why they call it a day stick? Because they use it to beat the living daylights out of it. Yeah. So
they don't call it a night stick for night.
No. So Judge Dredd, not all judges, but Judge Dredd has a certain chamber that he purchased to where he can get 8 hours of sleep in 10 minutes. So he works 24 hours, he works 23 hours and 50 minutes, sleeps for 10 minutes, and he's back on the beat again.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, you can get 8 hours.
So
don't you wish you had that?
No, no, because if I could only sleep 10 minutes an hour or 10 minutes a day, that means that'd be more work. So, I don't know if you're going to get to this, but Judge Dredd is a clone, right? Him and his brother.
He's got a brother called Rico, which is deceased now. and Judge Dredd is actually one that deceased him.
Oh,
But yeah, he broke the law.
But they were like cloned after like the head.
The very top judge, which I think his name was Fargo. He was the very first judge. They were actually cloned after him because there's like 4 or 5 judges killed almost every night inside the city, and so to keep up, to keep up law, they come through a cloning process. So Judge Dredd isn't the only clone.
Oh, okay. So are the majority of them clones?
No, just a portion of them.
Okay.
They just use that kind of supplement regular people. So when you look at the United States, the eastern border is Mega City 1. And if you go over to the west, it's Mega City 2. And there used to be a Mega City 3 down toward Texas. But Texas, like our real life Texas, they didn't want to be connected with everybody else. And so they actually fought a war and separated. They're not Mega City now. They're considered Texas City.
Okay.
Everything in between, outside of Mega City 1, Mega City 2, and Texas City, is called the Cursed Earth. The Cursed Earth is just an irradiated wasteland where, mutants are. These are people that
Is
are
that the Texas area?
Mutated.
Or just everything
Anything
outside
the city.
Okay.
So no mutants are allowed inside Texas City, Mega City 1, or Mega City 2 because they don't want you taking those genetic anomalies and breeding with other people and causing issues. So if you're a mutant, you got to be outside in the Cursed Earth. The mutant is somebody, there's an exception to that. There's some judges that have the mutant power of, they can kind of use, they're called side judges, and they can kind of read minds. And so they allow them to be in the judges because it's they're allowed those mutants to be inside the city and to be judges if they wish to be, simply because that's such a useful
and the
tool.
most popular one's Anderson?
Judge Anderson.
Judge Anderson?
Yeah.
Now, the reason I brought up him being a clone before you went on to the mutants is when I found that out, it kind of made sense when he says, I am the law, because they progressed his life up to the age of 5, and from the age of 5 until he was put into service, that's all he was taught was the law, the law, the law, the law, the law. Yeah. He didn't know about love, family, anything else. All he knows is the law. So when he says, I am the law, that's all he really is, right?
Right.
And that's kind of sad in itself.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, and I mean, every judge could say they are the law because they've got that right. They're that line between civilization.
He literally is nothing but the law in flesh incarnate.
One reason I always liked Judge Dredd, and like I said, the first Judge Dredd comic come out like in 1980 something in America, and this was a super popular.
When DC picked it up?
No, it was Eagle Comics.
Oh, okay.
And DC got it later. So it was super popular and one of the most popular indie comics at the time. But Judge Dredd is almost like a side character. Mega City 1 is as big a character as he is.
Okay.
And
well, of course it is.
So, I mean, like, they've got bans on sugar. Can't have sugar inside the city. Can't have caffeine inside the city. You can't smoke in the city in skyscrapers that are called smokatoriums. And they're totally designated. And if you break the law, you go into an ISO cube. It's a real small room where you got a bed and a toilet, and they feed you through a little hole in the wall, and you don't get to go out of there forever. And I mean, just like littering, you get a month in an ISO cube. And so to be honest with you, British made Judge Dredd, set in America. And
because they didn't really think highly of us.
No, they were making fun of America.
Right.
So they were making fun of, number one, our love of guns. And we do love our guns. Did you know there's for every 100 Americans, there's 120 guns? And they were making fun of, also there were several issues making fun of our obesity. And believe it or not, we're not the most obese country in the world. The Pacific's a lot of the islands, like Cook Islands,
get our ass in gear.
Samoa. Yeah, I think next year we can be number one if we try hard. And so there was a lot of poking fun at the United States, but it was funny because you're taking cliches and you're taking stereotypes about the United States and you're times them by 10. you're making these characters, but then Americans got it. We just loved it. We just loved it because I mean, Judge Dredd, he's not too undifferent than the Punisher, and that the Judge Dredd didn't make the law. He's just enforcing the law. So is he really the villain?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at British culture, they view Judge Dredd as the villain.
See, the way I looked at it, okay, so I've only read a few of the stories.
Yeah.
And when I read it, it really reads true to the state of humanity. Anything that is good to these people, the law takes away. There was a guy who was making candy. Was not addictive in any way, form, or fashion.
Sugar's illegal.
The sugar's illegal.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, okay, you've got something good for these people, let's dial it back a bit so these people can have something nice, they stick him on a ship and they fire his ass into space because that's the law. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so no wonder the world's going to shit because the people that's supposed to be helping the world isn't helping the world. So the whole state of humanity and life in general is a freaking joke in this comic book.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, a lot of things that were in the Judge Dredd comic back in the 70s when it was over in Britain, the Progs, and back in the 80s, which the 80s were just reprints of the Progs with color on them. That's all they were. They weren't original comics. And have come true today. A lot of things that they predicted.
And the police was lying to these people too?
No.
No. They lied about this guy dying. They told him he died. So not only does the law enforce the law can change the law and lie about it.
Hey, Judge Dredd is the law.
Yeah. I guess when you are the law, you can do whatever you dang well want.
So anyway, you don't even retire as being a judge. So you don't retire as being judge. So what you do is you take something called the long walk. And the long walk is...
I'm walking here.
they open up the doors to the city and they give you this little bitty parade.
Into the mutant area.
And you walk into the cursed earth and now you're to bring law to the lawless. And one of my favorite stories...
It seems like everybody in the area that you're serving and protecting is lawless.
Well, they're people...
They're as worse than the people that's living outside.
What about that?
Oh, the hell they ain't. When I read it, every time I read it, I thought this is the crappiest damn writing I've ever wrote. And this is so fucking sad because it's close to truth.
So anyway, when you take the long walk, you go into the cursed earth and you have to bring law to the lawless. And one of my favorite stories is a short story. And I gave you a comic.
Right.
It's called Judge Minty. So it's about an old man who... late in his life, he's still a judge, and he takes mercy on this guy, and it almost gets him killed. And so they're like, you know what? You kind of got a little longer too.
You have mercy on
you had a little compassion for that guy, so we think it's time for you to retire. So he goes out of here. He takes the long walk, and so that's the end of the comic. It's real short. It's a real short story in one single comic, but somebody picked that story up and made a fan film out of it.
Right, I seen that.
It's called Judge Minty. You watch it on YouTube.
I'm really surprised you're not wearing your Judge Dredd outfit today.
No, I haven't put it on. A copy of me, a picture of me in my Judge Dredd cosplay will be on the thumbnail. So the fan film, which we're going to talk about fan films sometime in the future. But Judge Minty, you need to check it out. So it's this old man who's out in this lawless society.
Now, how old are we talking? Because Dredd himself at the moment is like 70.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about Dredd is like Peter Parker is the perpetual teenager.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how old Peter Parker is. Typically, they reboot it and he's back in high school again.
Yeah.
So with Judge Dredd,
as the years have progressed,
he was about 18, 19. Whenever he started his career, so as the years progress, he's about 70-some years old now, and so obviously medical technology is different then than it is now. But if you look at pictures of Judge Dredd now, I mean, if you look at him at the beginning, he looked like a kid, fresh-faced kid. You look at him now, of course.
You say fresh-faced kid because what I like about the comics is you never see no more than this.
Right.
this much of his face.
Right. You only see him from right straight down. And so, but you see him, you gotta clean this with. But so yeah, years ago I cosplayed as Judge Dredd.
He always looks constipated.
And I made me a Judge Dredd helmet. Made me a Judge Dredd helmet. I am the law.
I am the law. There you
But
go. The law.
but anyway, that was tough to make. I made that completely out of foam. I went by Evil Ted. Went to his website. He walked me through it, and
Personally.
I made it. And I felt personal, but he's got a fantastic website on cosplay props.
Oh, hell yeah.
If I'd bought that, number one, it wouldn't fit my ginormous head. And number two, I wouldn't have had the pleasure of building one. So making it out of foam, I'll be honest with you, it's a trick. We had to make a mold of my head first.
Right.
Make sure it was right. And then get a template and then cut the template out of foam and glue it all together. But Judge Dredd's probably main villain is Judge Death.
Now, see, that's what I was. Isn't he from like an alternate universe?
He's from another universe where life has been considered illegal, and so he goes around killing everybody. He comes into the Judge Dredd universe, and his goal is to kill every living.
Well, see, this is how I found out about Anderson.
Yeah, Judge Anderson.
Right.
Yeah, so that's probably his number one big villain. Some of the best storylines was Cursed Earth, where Judge Dredd, he had to go out into the Cursed Earth and do a quest.
Because honestly, I was wondering that myself, who was his main villain, and it has to be somebody from the alternate universe, because in all retrospect, the law is not just the good guy, but they're also the villains as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people view Judge Dredd as a villain.
Right.
Yeah, I don't, but a lot of people do. So another big storyline was the apocalyptic war, and that was a war with Russia, and where we nuked them, they nuked them, and a lot of mega city was wiped out. Right, that was written by John Wagner, and Carlos did.
Now, does that
art on that?
The evidence of why there's a wasteland? Is there a reason why there's?
There was a nuclear war, but this was like a nuclear war after the World War III.
Oh.
It actually wiped out part of the city, and but the funny thing is after the bombs dropped, a lot of the city was destroyed. A lot of the resources were strained, and so you had food rations for a while. So if you were overweight, and you continued to be overweight, it was proof to them that somehow through the black market or on the street, you were getting extra food. So you're eating somebody else's food. So all the fat people were gathered up and put in a certain block. And you couldn't get out of that block unless you weighed. And once you weighed and you were down past a certain weight, they would allow you out of that block. Well,
so you were basically being punished for being able to afford more rations than the normal person.
Yeah, right. So you were eating somebody else's food.
It's not somebody else's if you can afford to pay for it.
Well, it's a food ration. You're only supposed to eat so much. So once the fat people would lose weight, they'd be able to leave that block. But lots of them would go out and celebrate at a buffet and gain so much weight that they'd have to go back into the block. Now,
I tell you what, some of the writing in this is just crazy.
Well, and now we're going to get to that here in a second. So eventually the food ration was lifted, and the fat people was able to leave the block, but they were so upset they started their own gang. Fat people got so fat they would add wheels underneath their stomachs, little props, so that they wouldn't tip over. They could just take their stomach and lay on top of like a unicycle. And I know that sounds bizarre and crazy, but that's the pleasure of Judge Dredd. America tried to do Judge Dredd comics. They tried to reboot them and start them all over.
Right.
And my cosplay is actually.
Is that when DC got a hold of it?
DC did it for a while, and IDW did it for a while.
Okay.
And so there for a while, like I said, Judge Dredd's in his 70s now. He grew a gray beard. Well, who else has got a gray beard?
You and me.
So that's when I decided to try to cosplay as that Judge Dredd, the Judge Dredd from the Blessed Earth series.
Blessed.
The thing is, these comics, Americans can't write Judge Dredd. Only Britons. I've read tons of American Judge Dredd, and they just don't get that whacked crazy humor
Right.
that drew me to that character.
That's the crazy thing about other countries is their form of humor is so different than American. Like, I love British comedy, but you've got to be able to understand British comedy to enjoy British comedy.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. The American comedians and British comedians and what we think's funny and what they think's funny is totally different. And Judge Dredd can only be done by the British, in my opinion. So hand me that comic back behind you. Besides Judge Anderson, there's another character I really like, and he's from the Judge Dredd universe. And his name is Missionary Man. Well, the comic's called Missionary Man, but his actually name it's supposed to be like Solomon Kane. They even named the character Saul Kane, not Solomon Kane, but Saul Kane. But basically, he's like Solomon Kane, Robert E. Howard's creation, but in a post-apocalyptic future. And he's a gun-toting, Bible scriptures quoting badass that roams the wasteland, a dispensing judge and dispensing justice. He used to be a Texas judge, and he found religion. He left and went out into the wasteland. So I really like that character too.
So didn't at one time Dredd himself stand up and try to change some of the laws and regulations of what he deemed wrong?
The only time I've ever known Judge Dredd to stretch the law or do his own thing is there was a storyline called The Judge Child, I think is what it was. Supposed to be some prophecy of this ultimate judge, and Judge Dredd goes and finds him and finds out he's totally evil, and so he doesn't tell the Justice Department about the existence of the Judge Child, that he found him, because he thinks it would be bad for society. But other than that, Judge Dredd pretty much just
He would have grew up to be Darth Vader.
follows the rules, maybe. So we had a couple of Judge Dredd movies.
Yeah.
So Judge Dredd, 1995 with Sylvester Stallone. What do you think about it?
So standalone. So like I said, what I knew about Dredd could fit in my hat. So it wasn't a whole lot. So when I first watched the movie, it was entertaining as itself because I didn't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
But then later on in life, as I learned a little bit more about Dredd and I learned about everything, I was kind of like, well, they didn't really stick true to the movie. But I also heard that, but that was kind of because Stallone was a part more of changing it into a comedy than a action drama kind of thing. He was trying to turn it into an action comedy kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Stallone actually made a good Judge Dredd. His voice,
But he took his helmet off.
and his face, but Judge Dredd never takes his helmet off. You've never seen Judge Dredd's. Well, let me set you straight. Judge Dredd takes his helmet off. You just never see his face in the comic. There's been times you've been sitting in the bath, but you can't see it. Times he had his helmet off and he was in shadows and you didn't see his whole face. You only see from about mid-nose down.
Right.
And so, but you can't
see his nose.
But you can't pay Sylvester Stallone. Yeah, you can see Boris nose. You can't pay Sylvester Stallone and not have him show his pretty face. He wouldn't allow it. It was a young director that was a big Judge Dredd fan. But what happened was
A British director at that, right?
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone come in there and mowed over top of it.
Right.
He was this big American star, and there was no way he was going to be a movie and not show his mug, even though the pay would have been the same. So what they got wrong about it was they let Sylvester Stallone have too much control.
Right. Cinematically, I think it looked pretty good.
Yeah, they let Sylvester Stallone take his helmet off. But what they got good was Mega City.
Right.
Look, first of all, they built miniatures back then. It wasn't CGI.
Right. It's practical effects.
11-foot tall buildings, 20-foot long alleys.
Bigatures.
Yeah,
miniatures is bigatures.
That they would go through and film through.
Right.
And so the far off scenes and the street scenes of Mega City captured the comic better than the 2012 movie did. And so they got that right. So do I like it? On a scale from 1 to 10, I probably give it a 6. It's one of those movies where I'll watch it every chance I get. You know, like if I see it on,
I'll watch it every chance I
no,
get.
if I'm flipping stations and I see it, I'll watch it, and I've probably watched it maybe 5 or 6 times over the years, just because I'm a Judge Dredd fan, and but they tried to, like you said, inject too much comedy in the wrong place, and so Dredd, I don't even own it, so that should give you an idea, because I'm big on physical media.
But you do own that one.
But I do own 2012, and so Karl Uban.
Karl Uban is like the ultimate geek actor, in my opinion.
Yeah, he is. He's played,
so many freaking.
Yeah, the other day we were trying to figure out who played more geeky roles than anybody.
I think it's Karl Uban.
Yeah, Karl Uban, without a doubt. I mean, if you could be any actor and have any actor's career, this is who I'd choose, right? Because he's just got an entire buffet of IPs that he's been able to choose from Marvel to Star Trek to Judge Dredd to The Boys and Lord of the Rings. I mean, he's been in everything. So, and he always snatches a prop from ever city. No, I don't blame him at all.
I hope the hell he's got like a Dredd.
I'm sure
helmet.
He's got something. So
he don't have the helmet.
So 2012 Dredd, they kind of did with him what they did with the Christopher Nolan Batmans. They tried to make the world realistic. So Mega City, you hardly see it all. But it just looks like any overpopulated city when they scan through it. There's nothing really stand out about it. But the story is fantastic. He never takes his helmet off in the whole movie.
Right.
And so this is an actor.
But wasn't this like one of his first, like, one big role, but one of his...
It was, I mean, it was several years ago. I mean, 2012, that's 11 years ago. But the thing is that he really nailed the voice down. The plot was good.
How can you nail a voice down as somebody that you never hear?
Because he nailed the voice down what I hear inside my head.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, he did fantastic. The reason the movie didn't get advertised very well, and it didn't make a ton of money. It's a cult classic. People love it, and I've probably watched it 10 times over the years since 2012. And there's a huge group of cosplayers that cosplay as the Judge Dredd from this movie, or as a judge from this movie.
So how did the outfit change versus
in the old comics?
This is not the comic book.
No, in the comic book version, you've got this huge shoulder pad, a giant eagle over here, and the helmet.
And Stallone's outfit pretty much stuck to pretty close.
It was close. Right? It was close. It was close. But the thing is that it's a fantastic movie. It had the girl that played Cersei from Game of Thrones. What's her name? I can't think of her name. But I was probably on the back. So, but I'm not going to spend all that time. But anyway, she did great. I mean, it was great acting. Had your Judge Anderson in there.
Okay.
Very violent. And so the premise of the movie was Judge Dredd is doing a review of a rookie Judge Anderson. And so it was so well done. And if you haven't seen it, if you love action movies, you definitely should. But it's fantastic. I belong to a Facebook group where guys work their butt offs to redo these costumes.
Oh, yeah?
I've thought about doing it. I don't know if I'll...
That's an expense.
I don't know if I'll... Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, cosplay typically is.
What about the... now, I know that Nintendo had done a Judge Dredd video game.
Yeah, they did a Judge Dredd...
And from what I heard, because of the backgrounds was a combination of what was in the comics and what was in the Stallone version of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it come out about the same time that the Judge Dredd movie came out.
I heard it wasn't a bad game.
No, I mean for the time. I mean, if you look back at it now, it's one of those side-scrolling games, and,
right?
And but they're still popular.
But you had a choice to either execute or arrest whoever you were coming.
And that's the thing. Everybody thinks that Judge Dredd executes everybody, but no, he follows the law. Most of the time, it's time in the ISO cube. Give you an example. There was a guy he caught, and he said, "I'll consider lessening your sentence if you give me some information on the other criminal." So he did. And then he was like, "Are you going to let?" He's like, "All right, that'd be 8 years. Take him away." He was like, "I thought you said you were going to consider lessening my my time if I give you some information. He said, yeah, I considered it and I changed my mind. He said, well, when I get out of here, he said, I'm going to hunt you up and take you down. He said, when I get out of here in 8 years, I'm going to hunt you down and make you pay. He was like, well, you just threatened a judge, so it's 12 years now. I said, 8. You love it. You know you do. But anyway, I made a Judge Dredd bus. I got 3D printer, just like everybody in the neighborhood.
I don't.
This is the largest print I've ever done. This took 3 days to print out.
Oh, wow.
So I hand painted it, and I'm not the best painter in the world, but from my skill level, I think it turned out pretty good.
I like it because you're so accurate to the original.
Right. This was a design made by Eastman, who he put it up on Thingiverse, and so you could download the diagram of it to splice it for free. And so I give it a little paint job. And so that and other things like it will be at our Comic-Con booth in Frankfurt Comic-Con on July 15th.
What? You're going to part with this?
Yes, if somebody wants to purchase it for the amount of time I put into it, then I will sell that and make me another.
How much time did you take to paint it?
It was 3 days to print it, and I paint real slow, and I don't paint all day long. I just go mess with it for a little bit and come back. But I'd say if you stretch all my time together and connect it, it'd be about 2 hours.
I so badly want to paint something like this because I want to put weather in it.
Yeah.
Details. Because I mean, it's got a lot of little details, especially in the armor area.
So while you're looking at that, let's step outside the geek zone for a little bit. So first of all, we have family, and I have friends that are in law enforcement, and so you always see that flag, American flag, that's black and white, and you got one thin blue line through it.
I've seen that.
So I mean, really, police officers get a bad rap. I mean, for the amount of stress and the amount of danger they do and the amount of pay that they get, there's only one reason they do that job. Because some people are wired to serve and protect. Some people are wired toward that job. They're definitely not doing it for accolades, and they're definitely not doing it for money.
Right.
And so I admire all police officers, and that thin blue line is what separates the civilized from the uncivilized. There a couple years ago.
But see, if it was up to you, there'd be judges.
Yes, yes, there would be. Now, I'll be honest about that. So there a couple years ago, there was a few cities in the United States, this defund the police movement got started. And a lot of politicians were stupid enough to actually defund their police departments.
Right.
And now what's happened is crime in those cities, Chicago, Portland would be another, has reached a point to where all your retailers are leaving. They're getting robbed so much, they're just shutting down the stores and moving them out.
I've seen where people in some neighborhoods actually have to go several counties over just to go get groceries.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now the politicians are trying to backtrack and trying to fund the police. But the thing is, these police officers have already moved on.
Yeah.
And moved on to other cities or moved on to other jobs completely. And so they don't have a cloning process the way Mega City 1 does. And so a lot of them are collapsing,
And what's scarier is there's a lot of groups that are beginning to police their neighborhoods because there aren't enough police.
Right.
And that's kind of scary in itself.
Well, then that causes issues. There was a guy, I think it was in New York, who he had mental problems, and he'd been arrested like 40 times. And he was terrorizing some people on a subway, and a Marine choked him out, choked him unconscious. After he got through choking him, he put him in a recovery position. The guy never recovered, he died.
Right.
So people were protesting that. And so protesting by standing on the subway train and blocking this. Once the subway would stop, they'd stand on the tracks, keeping the subway from going without injuring them, and keeping people from going to work. And see, if I was in control, I'd send some judges down there with some day sticks, and they would never ever stand on the subway tracks again.
But see, like I said, okay, so I got a friend who lives in a part of Kentucky. We live here in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And they defunded the police. And so there was a group of people who gathered together, and they literally walked the streets with AK-47s and stuff like that. And it's the KKK. Now, who really trusts the KKK to uphold what is right and just when they have such a narrow view of what they think is moral and right?
I don't agree with citizens having to put out their own fires.
Right.
I don't agree with citizens having to.
I mean, don't let your shit burn, but
yeah. I don't agree with citizens having to operate on each other, do surgery.
no.
And I don't agree with citizens hooking their own electricity up. And I don't agree with citizens policing their own neighborhoods. You know, but the thing is, you need to fund the police. If I was in control, the police would have the best equipment. They would have the best weapons, and they would have the best training. Are there bad policemen out there? Yes, but there's bad dentists and bad plumbers and bad carpenters and bad auto mechanics, and the amount of bad policemen out there are a fraction.
But as the whole, they are taught to take themselves out of their role and stick to the law.
Yeah, right. And I just want to close by saying that I admire all police officers out there. I do. And you don't ever have to worry anything about me because I'm not a criminal.
Not that he would tell you any damn way.
All right. Well, I mean, when you talk about defunding the police, there was 3 types of people that wanted to defund the police. There was criminals, there was the mentally retarded, and there was mentally retarded criminals. Those are the only people that would want to defund the police department. That was ridiculous. Okay.
No. Then you had the gullible. Don't forget those. Those sheep. Yeah. Those sheep that follows the mass.
Yeah, I put them under the mentally retarded.
Oh, okay.
Okay, all right. You done?
I'm done.
We better be. We'll get in trouble if we keep talking. Okay, we're done.
Take care of yourselves.